a very interesting set of remarks, problems, solutions. So now I turn to our panel, and if they allow, I will take the alphabetic order as well. Each of you are suggested to react in not more than 5 minutes to what you have heard. Do you agree? Do you disagree? On which point? What additional comment would you like to make? Or any other topic, but within 5 minutes. So I start with Inge Bernaerts, please.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much to the organizers for having me here on this panel. It is, of course, a challenge for me after my president, Barroso, has made yesterday evening a warm plea for the single market and how it can contribute to economic recovery. And after my Director General this morning has indicated how the single energy market contributes not only to economic recovery but also to sustainable energy use, to still give you an added value and new ideas in my 5-minute intervention. But let me still try to do so. I would like to pick up two concepts that have come up in a different context in the debate yesterday. And the first one is President Barroso's concept of implementation. The second point that I would like to raise came up yesterday when Mark Leonard asked the question in the context of a common foreign policy: is there sufficient common purpose? Those are two points which I think are very relevant to describe the state of the union in energy market in Europe today as well. On the point of implementation, if we look around in Europe to the different member states and check what is happening in reality and compare that to what the rules say, I think we have to observe that there is a significant gap. And that also when it comes to internal energy market legislation, implementation is lagging behind. If I just look at the transposition of the third package, then I see that more than a year after the expiry date of transposition, almost half of member states have not fully transposed those directives yet. And if I look at the second package legislation from 2006, I still see that on basic principles like transparency by the TSOs, the necessary publication of objective data, we still have plenty of outstanding disputes. So if we want to complete the internal energy market by 2014, I think that we need to move from the rules to the reality, and as President Barroso said yesterday, just do it. My second point is about the question whether there is a sufficient common sense of purpose. And here I am a little bit more optimistic, because if I look around the industry today, then I see that, for example, when it comes to our TSOs, our network operators, after the unbundling concept is taking form, you do see a common sense of purpose more and more amongst our TSOs. That is happening through industrial trends, consolidation of our TSOs, but also thanks to the European networks of TSOs that the third package has created. And we'll hear later today representatives talking about the effects. Whereas before, our network operators were listening to the supply arms to see which investment decisions they would be taken, they now develop 10-year network development plans that look at Europe as a whole. They now start to work out network codes which are not just applicable in one jurisdiction, but which apply throughout Europe. And I think those elements will really make a substantial difference between now and 2014. Likewise, on the institutional front, if we look at the national regulators, more and more our market becomes European through market coupling and other factors, and regulators obviously need to follow this trend. From an institution that existed before, where national regulators were cooperating and exchanging best practices, we now have an agency in Ljubljana and Alberto Pototschnig is its director, which truly develops European regulation and where our national regulators do not just exchange best practices, but also actually take decisions and take those decisions by majority voting when they have to. And also this makes a substantial difference to what we had under the first and the second package. Now, when it comes to the common sense of purpose, there are also reasons to be more worried. And in particular, if I think about the electricity sector and the fact that the sentiment amongst populations and politicians about issues such as the energy mix are so different between countries. If you take Poland and Germany, for example, or Austria and France, that this inevitably disrupts the common sense of purpose that we have within Europe. So what I see as the main challenge in completing the internal market by 2013 is to deal with this question. How can we make sure that where our member states have to intervene in markets in order to achieve the objectives that their population wants in terms of energy mix, that they do so still in a coordinated way, taking into account the impact of their actions in neighboring states and trying to intervene only where it's really necessary, so that their intervention is meant to make markets work and not to replace the positive effect of markets on a lasting basis. I see my time is up, so I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next intervention is President Guido Bortoni, President of the Autorità.
Thank you. Good morning to everybody. First of all, my warmest thanks to the organizer for inviting the Italian Regulator Authority to participate in this panel. So I have, let's say, two prepared or, let's say, well-prepared intervention or messages and one reaction to what we heard from previous speaker. The goal of completing the internal energy market by 2014 is certainly a challenging one, but we believe that the integration of energy markets is a fundamental step in the progressive development of European Union. So, as Mr. Mandil said, a prerequisite for economic growth of the Union. In my address as the Italian Regulator Authority, I will be focusing on the electricity and gas sector and a few insights, just the two ideas. Electricity. The past year, Italy has witnessed a significant changes in the technological composition of our generation portfolio, with an impressive growth in power production by renewable energy sources and photovoltaics in particular, as well as wind power. These are profound changes involving the integration of non-programmable renewable sources, and the effects of these changes emerged gradually in Italy at first, before growing to become very deep for the market, especially since the fourth quarter of 2011, last year. Considering the trends in the wholesale market prices, IPEX, the Italian market in particular, it appears that the growth in production of non-programmable renewable sources has caused an important change in the fundamentals underlying the very functioning of the electricity market in Italy. In October-November last year, the most significant effect manifested itself as a sharp increase in hourly prices on the day-ahead market in the evening hours, let's say since 5 to 9 p.m. That is the time slots when the photovoltaic production, which currently involves nearly 400,000 plants, more than 13 gigawatt installed, is gradually diminishing. The prices for the evening hours in IPEX during the fourth quarter of last year had a 30% increase relative to the same period of the previous year. These elements, which might seem like details specific to the Italian situation, are being brought to your attention because the current market design, both nationally and on European scale, was originally conceived with a more traditional generation portfolio. This design, however, will need to be reconceived in consideration of the large-scale deployment of non-programmable and renewable sources. So we support ideas we heard from Professor Newbery to identify the best measure for adapting the market design, what we have as market design, to the new needs in support of the European-wide integration of renewable sources, as foreseen for the achievement of the 2000 targets, as well as for the beyond targets, let's say 2050. As the Italian regulator, we are working also in cooperation with our EU colleagues within CR to progress in this field, as well as within the ACER working group in order to think about these profound changes and to find suitable solutions. Gas sector. As for the gas sector, I just have one message to you, is to introduce appropriate levels of competition and efficiency to the market in compliance, of course, with security of supply criteria. In the gas sector, even more than in the electricity sector, Europe as a whole represents the most fitting spatial dimension for characterizing this context. This is, in that terms, this is so for the time being because the commodity is highly concentrated in the hands of very few producers, often outside European jurisdiction, and the consequent need to frame the supply infrastructure as a supranational function. Of course, this is the current scenario we have to cope with. This geographically wide horizon suggests we treat the time frame as being dilated too, because the competition in this sector, in gas sector, is running along medium and long-term time horizons, not much in the short term. The development of infrastructures play a key role in this context and should not be driven by security concerns alone, but also, and even more importantly, by the proportion of competition. In regard to our own country, Italy, the cold spell last February drew our attention to the more need for infrastructures. If our country had had more regasifiers, more storage, and a few more pipelines, the impact would have been much more modest. More gas infrastructures entails a broader diversification of sources and routes, more market with more storage, which can also help mitigate negative price effects, and greater proximity to other markets.
Dear colleague, I am sorry your time
I'm just concluding with the reaction you expect. Just one quick reaction to the words of Director Lowe. He said there is an equation: more market, less regulation. I'm just saying this is not true or necessarily true. There are many reasons. One overall, more market means more pluralisms, more risks, more need of good rules to minimize risks or to foster the risk management to the better qualified operator. This is, let's say, a touchable reality we have every day. It is not just a reason to survive as a regulator. We believe on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bortoni, and I apologize for interruption. Now, next speaker is Daniel Dobbeni, SoU.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, of course, in this beautiful location. When you pointed out, Mr. Chairman, we should think about, is it really useful what we're doing in terms of the energy market? I just had a sentence coming to my mind, maybe because we are in Florence. It's a well-known sentence: if you don't believe in education, just try ignorance. And I could paraphrase that if you don't believe in the electricity internal market and in strong interconnected power system for Europe, just try isolated system, and you will immediately see that you don't have the reliability we have today, nor the security of supply. But I'm optimistic for the next years with many different reasons. The first one is that, as we heard yesterday, Europe has tremendous difficulty to agree on 27. If you're married, you already know that it's difficult sometimes to agree with just two of you. But we agreed on the common market model. And we also agreed to implement it by 2014. The 27 head of states, but also all market participants and all market actors. This is already a tremendous step forward. We also agreed that it would be based on market coupling. And to make it happen, we even have a piece of legislation. We have network codes that will become binding. So finally, we have something that may achieve the same kind of rules in the 27 head of states, at least for electricity and gas. But this is not the end of the road. We still need to harmonize or to make compatible. The common market model will be only as good as we have compatible renewable schemes, supports for what we call today capacity generation, reserve generation. I know that talking about harmonizing those subsidy mechanisms is very dangerous even today, but we have to face the fact that a common market model works only as good as it is implemented in the different member states, including all subsidy mechanisms. And there, I'm starting to be concerned about all the mechanisms that member states are, or some member states are thinking about to promote classical generation, because once again, by matter of subsidiarity, each and every country that is contemplating capacity markets is going to implement it in a different way. And this is not in line with a common market model. Now, you know that for software, because market rules is the software of our internal market, for software to work correctly, you need a good hardware. And hardware is generation and transmission. Transmission, we need capacity. We talk about that for the last 15 years. We just, as an association, put on the website the 10-year network development plan for 2012-2022, so the next 10 years. And I was used to talk about the number of kilometers of lines or cables we have to build or refurbish. I would like to look at it in a different way. What we ask for is not that much. Is increasing the existing transmission grid by 1.3% a year during the next 10 years. That's not that much. We are going to replace 30% of the generation, mostly by renewables, not located where the existing plants are. So 1.3% a year is not that much. Is it going to cost a lot for the society? For residential customers, it will mean 1%, less than 1% increase in the electricity bill. And Professor Newberry just showed that providing you have good market coupling, FTRs, and capacity, there are tremendous savings to do in terms of pricing for some member states. So we should not forget that this also brings other advantages, this 1.3% increase in grid in the next 10 years. We will meet the rest target. We will save 170 megatons of CO2. So there are many advantages. So the question is, why is it not happening? I think President Barroso yesterday said it very clearly, is that we need political leaders to endorse the decisions taken in Brussels when they go back to their country. How is it possible, ladies and gentlemen, that everybody agrees that we need to build those transmission lines, but that we still today are facing with systems, procedures in each member state that makes it pretty difficult to build and operate? Still today, we contemplate realization times for grids of high voltage, of course, somewhere around 5 to 10 years. So we need to endorse the decision taken in Brussels. And there are signals that show that we need to do it now. The cold spell of February, where the system was very stretched. The increasing redispatching cost, that by definition is a loss for the social welfare. And finally, the lack of generation that is showing to increase in the different member states, as was pointed out for Italy. And finally, just to conclude, even several centuries ago, Florence, in order to conquer Siena, ensured that they were keeping the lights on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dobbeni. Now I give the floor to Juan Perez of EPEX.
Good morning, all of you. My warmest congratulations again to the Institute and Professor Glachan. I will, as Mrs. Bernaerts said, build on the concept of implementation. First, I will try to explain to you how the power exchanges and EPEX sees the world from which perspective, and to that end I will quote former Energy Commissioner Mr. Piebalgs 4 years ago, almost day by day, at the press conference creating or giving birth to EPEX Spot. At that time he said, the price in Germany and France actually is the reference price for the rest of Europe. It is of an utmost importance that this reference price comes from a transparent market with sufficient volumes traded and with a sufficient number of actors. I strongly believe, that with proper supervision of the exchange, the price will and should be trusted by all market participants and all political decision makers, myself included. Now, the issue is that without liquid markets, target models are a bit utopic. Liquidity in markets doesn't come only from regulations and from political drivers. It comes as well from listening to the market voices, to the market participants, listening to their needs. Building liquidity is a difficult job. That's where the exchanges play a key role. The exchanges are making their contribution alongside DG Energy, the regulators, Acer, SoU, the TSOs, and the market participants. We have relentlessly cooperated during the past years. We have a track record everybody knows. However, as Daniel Dobbeni said, cooperation is not easy. It works. It can happen, but it is extremely difficult. On the power exchanges, we are very different animals from regulated monopolies by law to merchant exchanges to exclusively licensed exchanges. And in spite of that, I am also optimistic that we will deliver and we will implement. We have been creative over the past years. We need that. We need innovation because the target models are static. And as we speak, the market design is already requiring new changes. Renewables are penetrating more and more. Trading in 15-minute contracts is happening more and more. Everything is moving. We need flexibility. We need rules that can not only be implemented but also be changed and be evolutive. I would like now to give you a small concrete example of something which is being implemented. Something which is implementing what we call the euro for electricity, which is the coordinated day-ahead price formation for Europe. The day-ahead market is simply the pillar for the European market. It's the pillar for the forward and for the derivatives market, and it's very important as well for the balancing market. On the day-ahead market, there is an initiative, a project called the PCR, the Price Coupling of Regions. The PCR, it's the way power exchanges are cooperating in order to deliver the single coordinated matching function, which is necessary to implement the 2014 day-ahead target model for electricity. The PCR has been endorsed by regulators, by TSOs, by other stakeholders. We are doing this with a lot of work and dedication by a bunch of key experts. The design phase of this project is today almost finalized, and we are now moving into the final implementation phase. We think today that the delivery of the day-ahead European target model by 2014 through the PCR is still achievable. The final implementation will, however, be very challenging. Those of you who have been involved in market coupling projects in the past know about this. It requires, above all, a very high degree of mutual trust and cooperation spirit between TSOs and power exchanges, under direct regulatory oversight by the authorities and the European Commission in particular. We are a bit concerned that some parties are still trying to introduce concepts in the governance guideline that might conflict with PCR and which have potential to block. And network codes should be limited to issues that are relevant to network codes and not interfere with the guideline. Just to conclude in this room, a well-known French person said once that strategy is a simple art, that all lies in implementation. Implementation is what power exchanges know best to do, bringing the software, but the software which is liquid. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Perez. Now I give the floor to Alberto Pototschnig. Mr. Pototschnig, I am the feeling, my perception is that many of the challenges which have been seen during the beginning of this roundtable are on your shoulders.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, and thanks to the Institute and to Jean-Michel for giving me the opportunity to share some reflection in this quite stunning and inspiring environment. I think it's on the shoulders of everyone, of most people in this room, because it is a concerted effort, must be a concerted effort. It's not just the agencies, not just regulators, it's not just TSOs, it's the industry as a whole that needs to move together. And I completely agree with Inge Bernaerts when she was saying there seems to be now sort of clear signs of common purpose. And I would say that this is what has changed over the last few years. I would like to focus on 3 points. Probably I won't have time to go through all of them, but first is what we're trying to achieve. How would we know that we have achieved what we're supposed to achieve by 2014? The second aspect is, has it taken too long, or could have been done on a shorter period of time? And then third is, what's there for European citizens? Because we always need to remind ourselves that if we're doing all this, it's not for the regulators, it's not for the TSOs, it's not for the industry, it's for European consumers. So we should always try to explain and to see our effort in that vision. Now, what are we trying to achieve? I think the test that I would use to check whether we have achieved internal market is what I would call a single market paradigm, i.e. we should get to the point where trading, moving energy across borders, across political borders, should be as simple or as difficult as moving or trading energy within borders, so that political borders shouldn't mind anymore. And what we need here are obviously two ingredients. We need rules, common rules, single rules, and we need infrastructure. And I think those panelists and speakers that have spoke ahead of me have already said that we are going down the route. On infrastructure, there is now the infrastructure package proposal with an attempt of streamlining the administrative procedure for developing infrastructure. Now, we don't only need rules and infrastructure, we also need to implement the rules. And this is basically the bet that we are taking collectively at the moment. While we are developing the framework guidelines and network codes, which will set the single rules for Europe, we are also trying to implement them at the same time. It is a challenge because there is a risk, obviously, that the rules once implemented, once adopted, would be slightly different from what we are looking at now. But I think it's a challenge worth taking. And in my view, also, there is no other way of getting to some results by 2014. Now, has it taken too long? Well, I don't know. My impression is that we had to go through a change of culture. Also, the framework, the background, or the environment has become more and more complex. When the whole process started 20 years ago, there was almost a single objective, which was, integrating the market, efficiency, competition. I mean, you can see it from different angles. Now, we've heard this morning from the Director General Lowe, the scene is much more complex. We have the challenge of climate change. We have security of supply issues. So we're trying to develop an internal market on a much more complex, in a much more complex framework. And I mean, if I had more time, I can give you a few anecdotes why you also need a change in culture. I'll just give you a couple of examples. In 2000, an administrative court in Europe overruled the regulator saying that auctions are not the appropriate method for allocating scarce capacity in a market. Now, clearly, that was 12 years ago, but that was the prevailing feeling at that time, and not just among administrative judges. And, market coupling as a concept was only born in the modern meaning 9 years ago, on the 17th of March, 2003. That's what the first time this concept came up. So I think it is, it needs a change of culture. We spent some time in 2006 trying to understand what open market coupling might have meant, and then we realized after 6 months that it was just the same concept with a slightly different institutional setting. So yes, we could have done it more quickly, but I think we shouldn't be sort of wondering whether that was the case or not. We just need now to put all our effort to try to achieve the goal. And just to conclude, I see two main challenges now. One is for gas to follow the same path of electricity, i.e. to agree on a vision and then start implementing it. And I've seen recently good signs from the TSOs on this. And for electricity to complete the implementation of what we have, of the common vision that was developed recently over the last sort of 4 or 5 years, but then also try to understand what the new challenges might mean for that vision. Because I think that the target model or the vision that we have now needs to be still worked on to incorporate the challenges of a more complex energy framework. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Professor Ranci, I think it is quite fortunate that you are the last speaker of the panel, because I know your talent for wrapping up the debate.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'm afraid I shall not fulfill your wish. It's very difficult to wrap up this discussion, and I think it has been a discussion clear enough. Now, I wish to take advantage of this absolutely exceptional conference to raise an issue that is not central to the European energy market, but which is central, in my view, to the responsibilities of Europe and of the European energy industry, and that is the energy divide in the world. The International Energy Agency estimates that 1.3 billion people in the world have no access to electricity, and 2.7 billion people rely on biomass for cooking, contributing to the devastation of the environment and to their own health, and to the and raising a danger to their own health. This is not going to disappear. In the new policy scenario, which is a rather optimistic scenario of the IEA, there will still be 1 billion people with no access to electricity in year 2030. Although investment for the purpose of reducing this divide is included in the scenario for an amount of $275 billion from today to year 2030. I believe that this is something that has to be faced. I read about a commitment that the European institutions are considering for Europe taking responsibility to provide access to modern forms of energy to 500 million people between now and year 2030. And I hope that this can materialize in specific projects. What I've read about is the institution of a technical assistance facility providing expertise. I believe that this is something that has to do with the social and political sustainability of our model. And Europe cannot restrict to commiserate itself for the temporary setback in economic growth or for some difficulties in maintaining market shares of European products in the world markets. There is something that has to be done, and of course this is a primary responsibility of the public institutions, but it would not be correct or effective to appropriate public money and then look for the way of spending it. Shaping feasible projects comes first, and that requires the effort of those who have information, knowledge, and competence. So I look forward to some joint effort, and I expect the champions of private initiative to take initiatives and drag the rest of the compound into a more focused effort to face this huge problem, which is in the responsibility of a wealthy area of the world, which is Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Ranci, for adding a question which perhaps was not in the main domain of our roundtable, but which is so essential and so consistent with the spirit of our continent. So I suppose that we will speak again of that during other sessions. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have 10 minutes, let us say, for reactions and questions from the audience. Please raise your hand. I have somebody who wants to speak here. I presume there are some microphones. Fourth, here. Now you have two microphones.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Christian Buchel from Distribution of France. The question is related to the electricity sector. Market, at the end of the day, means customer and customers, and very largely, the customers are connected to the distribution operator. Renewables, and especially the decentralized ones, are largely connected, very largely connected to the distribution operators. So the question, I don't know if the question is from Mr. Lower or Mr. Pototschnig or perhaps Mr. Newberry, but how do you see in the coming years the role, the business model of the distribution operators in terms of local balancing, in terms of metering, in terms of energy efficiency, because I'm, in my opinion, the hardware, Mr. Dobbeni, I think it's generation, it's transmission, yes, it's also distribution, it's probably also metering, and it's all the industry inside the smart home. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Who wants to answer? Philippe?
Well, I'll start, and it will give me the opportunity to respond on the issue of the balance between markets and regulation as well. I think that, first of all, with respect to the business model of DSOs, the model surely cannot be as a unique gatekeeper for everything which touches the consumer. That would be actually a way of frustrating innovation and indeed differentiation of different marketing approaches towards the consumer, and actually preventing competition taking place in terms of offering the consumer packages which he wants in the way in which he wants them. And also that a precondition for all that is the smartness of the information around the market. At the same time, I don't see personally why any DSO should not be able to cooperate as compete as a competitor for those services either. So a model which excludes the DSOs from taking part in the market for energy services and supply of energy seems to be also the wrong way, and I think we need to look for a middle way. And this comes back to which means everyone should be able to compete, including DSOs. It comes back to the question which I think was mentioned by Guido Bortoni on how much regulation and when. Now, in the energy sector, we're bound to always have a significant amount of regulation in relation to natural monopolies, such as pipelines and networks. But there are two areas where I believe that there is an inevitable transition in the process. One is if you're having to control the conduct of incumbents, ultimately speaking, as you create the capacity for new entrants, then it should be possible to lighten that regulation and allow competition authorities and to play the key role in policing what's going on, without that being the subject of regulation from either the Commission or indeed the national regulators. And of course, in France and elsewhere, there are plenty of voices which say, well, prices of energy haven't gone down, therefore your liberalization is a failure. And we continually point out the reason why they haven't gone down is most of them are still regulated. So, and that comes back to Inge Bernaerts' point, you can't talk about liberalization until you've actually liberalized. And in those markets where consumer organizations complain to us, they say, well, what are you going to do about it? And that's what energy companies say to us too. Let us compete, and then we'll be able to offer services to consumers at the retail level, which makes sense. The other area where, of course, regulation has to be regularly reviewed is where you're pursuing a public policy objective like climate change, which implies support to renewables, encouraging producer-consumer business models. Surely we have to have a trajectory here which recognizes the gradual advantages which can be gained from rollout of renewable technology, and at a certain point we have to say it's Schluss, and that there isn't a permanent expectation that every new technology should be the subject of favorable regulation and favorable access or favorable price. Ultimately speaking, there must be some clock ticking to make sure that we return to a situation of normal commercial activity and innovation without subsidy. That's not without subsidy to research and development and innovation, but the rollout of products on the market and services on the market should surely not require on a permanent basis subsidy. The makers of traditional vacuum cleaners didn't receive subsidy. The maker of the new dustless vacuum cleaner didn't have a permanent feed-in tariff for his vacuum cleaner. That's what I'm getting at.
Thank you. There is a question here, third row. And then I will take another one, and we will have to, sorry for all the hands which are raising. Please.
Thank you. Gunnar Lundberg, Chairman of Euroelectrics Markets Committee. I'm a little bit astonished that we have 8 representatives in the panel, and all of them saying that we are on the right track, the market is on its way, we will meet the Council's goal 2014. But is that really the truth? I think 600 years ago it was not risk-free to say in this room that the Earth is a globe. You could be in deep trouble if you said that in this room 600 years ago. But I hope it's risk-free to say that we are not on the track in the market. What we see is that subsidies to renewables destroys not just the market price, but also the price on carbon, because we are decarbonizing for a cost of more than 100 euro per ton with offshore wind and other things, when the market price on carbon is less than 10 euro. We are seeing that market integration doesn't work because transmission system operator and power exchanges cannot cooperate. We have heard in the groups of AESAG and AHAG earlier that next meeting we will see an agreement between them how they will do this. But it's not happening, and we will probably not see anything in the Florence Forum 2 weeks from now. What is happening? Are we on the wrong institutional level? Do we need one European TSO, one European power exchange to make it happen? Because if these all institutions cannot cooperate, are we really making it possible? So I mean, I would have expected a little bit more serious discussion in the panel about the real problems, because it is not for sure that we are on the track. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I am very anxious because I suspect that answering your question would need a full session, and we are 2 minutes from the end. I don't know whether somebody, Mr. Pototschnig, tried to summarize in 1 minute what
well, you're right, because otherwise we would stay here for the whole day. No, Gunnar, I think I sort of see your point that not everything is perfect, but I think we are making progress. I mean, if you look back over the last 3 years, 4 years, now we know where we need to go. Since last December, we have also agreed roadmaps to get there. Yes, the path is not smooth, and every month, there is a hiccup, something coming up. I spend a lot of my time writing to TSOs, to regulators, sort of urging them to sort of push the process ahead, etc. But at least now we have, I think that there is a sense of common purpose. I think there is a roadmap. At least we know if we are late. Something that until recently we didn't know. And in fact, as we've been discussing, we've been around 20 years trying to achieve this. I don't think that a lot of time has been wasted. This is a very complex project. And I think, it won't be, it's not in 2014 we will have the job done and then have, go on holiday. I think this will be a continuous project. But I think now we have everything, all the ingredients there. And I agree with you, sometimes we have disagreement among stakeholders, among participants. But at least now we have the tools in place. And if we can get this voluntarily and in parallel as we are doing it now, very soon we'll have it through the network codes. But I think it's best for everyone if we try to put this effort together now and do it. So yes, it's not perfect, but the world is never perfect. But I think now we're in a much better position than ever before to try to do it.
Thank you. I think that Philip wants to have a 1 minute answer too.
Right. It will be 1 minute. The glass is half full and half empty, of course. But the reason why I believe that we can put fuel back into the tank and get this done and make it work is that I think we keep forgetting why we started off on this. We kept forgetting the fundamental reasons why we're in this. We were in renewables because we were convinced that it was necessary to bring costs down by large-scale rollout of renewables from a level of only 2% of energy consumption to 20%. It makes sense to support renewables in that context. However, in 2020, if we get to the point of actually meeting the target, the arguments when we've actually got wind, onshore wind and solar already with costs coming dramatically down, the arguments for continuing that same regime are much more fragile. There must be a degressivity of subsidy in relation to costs. And of course, yes, my commissioner and I regret many times the number of stakeholders we have to bring together in order to make something work. And I think that market players realize that too, and that it would be eminently desirable in some areas that there would be a further concentration of economic activity in certain sectors. I'm not talking about DSOs and TSOs as a whole. One is not possible, but a certain degree of confidence in a business model which works across frontiers in several markets seems to be a good thing, and it will drive the process, and it will mean that the regulators don't have to drive the process as much as they do today.
Thank you. Daniel Dobbeni.
Just a few words. Your point, Gunnar, reminds me of 2005, 2006, when a certain number of partners tried to put together the idea of market coupling between the Netherlands, Belgium, and France. At that time, I think all parties were against the idea. And I heard so many people saying that it would fail, that this would not be the solution, that there were so many other solutions. So criticism is easy, but I would much prefer that all parties concerned try to find out how to help solving issues today in order to make it happen tomorrow.
Thank you very much. I'm looking at my watch, and I think we have to stop there. Let me take the privilege of chairing this session to give myself the last minute. And I think that this was an extraordinarily interesting session. There is perhaps one word which is missing, or at least we have not emphasized enough, which is flexibility, the need for flexibility. And I would like to explain that for two reasons. The first one is that we have not at all addressed the issue of technical progress. We have discussed as if the technical picture was as it is right now and would stay in the future. Well, I'm not sure it is true. What will be the market design if there is a very strong decrease in the costs of some renewables? What will be the market design if we make a breakthrough progress in electricity storage? What will be the market design if we make a tremendous program in transmission with supraconductivity? It's not tomorrow, it's maybe the day after tomorrow. And that does not mean we don't have to do anything, but we have to keep flexibility possible. And the second reason, which I think was well shown in our debate, even if sometimes implicitly, is that if everybody agrees that we need an internal market as soon as possible, and that it means much more coordination between operators, much more connections between countries, etc., I think that we have to realize that the conditions today are not exactly the same as the ones which prevailed when the market design was elaborated 20 years ago. At that time, the general perception was that there would be a convergence towards a common energy mix inside the EU. Today, we know that it is the exact opposite, that there will not be any energy mix and perhaps increasingly less convergence between the different energy mixes. At that time, we thought energy efficiency would result of the market forces. Now we know that we need very strong public policies to implement very demanding targets, demanding goals for energy efficiency. At that time, the intermittency of renewables was not a problem just because the share of renewables was so small. Now we know that it becomes a very strong problem, and the market design is not so far fit to addressing this very specific issue. And I could go on. That means, in my view, that we have to hope and to work for much more strength in achieving the internal market as soon as possible. But at the same time, that is not contradictory, to keep it open to perhaps modified the market design as it was decided some years ago, and to take into account what is new. And I was in agreement with almost everything what Philippe said. Perhaps the slight point of disagreement is that I think that that means this market is not a market as any other one, and that probably we will need a strong regulation for a very long time. Now, I thank you very much. I thank you for your patience.